After that, we actually had a meal, a giant meal that was all crew, all space station and all space shuttle crew together. We did it in the Russian segment, had Russian food, Japanese food, US food. And these are just some more photos of the kind of things we do inside of the space shuttle. Of course, we have laundry. Of course, we have to work out. We did sleep each day. On average, my time, we wear this little fancy watch, and I don't know if you can see it in any of these photos, but some of the folks will be wearing it. It's kind of a black box next to their regular watch. Mostly the rookies will be wearing it. But it measures how much time you're awake or you're asleep. And so on Garrett's arm, you can see it on his left arm there. Garrett and I went to Caltech together as graduate students. And that little watch that's on your arm actually measures the light that it's in and actual motions of your wrist. And so if it's in the light and it's moving around, it thinks you're awake. And if it's in the dark and not moving, it thinks you're asleep. And so it measures that. And we had crew members that were down in the 3 hours and 45 minutes worth of sleep. I was pretty lucky. I had the high number. I was at the 6-hour point for my total amount of sleep. This was what's called a DTO, a detailed test objective, where we were actually performing a task where we practiced using a tile repair technique on orbit and packed it in this box and took it over and stowed it inside the space shuttle payload bay. And this actually tested out the system that we have for repairing the tile on the orbiter should we have some damage to it prior to launch or during launch.
Compare the level of physical exertion of a 7 hours EVA to an Earthbound level of exertion.
One of the things that we get really good training on, that's another mirror that I got teased about for being in front of, but we get pretty good training on the spacewalk side of things. And so each one of the spacewalks we'll do between 5 and 8 times in the neutral buoyancy lab. It's a big swimming pool that has a scaled, full-size mock-up of the space station floating in the bottom or sitting in the bottom of it. We'll climb around on that, and that is much more tiring than anything that you would do on orbit. I would say that each of the spacewalkers, the ones that are pretty good at it, are kind of my size. They probably are in the bench press range of between 250 and 300 pounds, sort of a thing. It's a physical set of exertions that you need to put in to move your body around from place to place. Grip strength is also really important. The gloves are pressurized, and so since they're pressurized, whenever you move your fingers, you are basically squeezing a tennis ball to get it into the new position. So I can tell when folks have been training, and my hands are weak right now, but I can tell when I shake hands with the guys who are close to their full potential, I guess, for getting ready to go do a spacewalk. So one of the things that we had to do on our flight was take that large inspection boom that we use to do inspections of the underside of the orbiter and store it on the space station. The next flight coming up had a Japanese module as well. We had apparently given the dimensions of the shuttle payload bay to the Japanese and said, yeah, we can take anything that fits inside of here. Well, they took us up on it and built something that fit and filled up the entire shuttle payload bay. What it meant was some normal things that we take with us, there was no room for. And so we left our inspection boom behind so the next crew could use it once they got to orbit. My partner Mike had to do some work on a rotary joint on the space station that needed some cleaning. And this is a picture of that material science experiment that we installed before heading back in after our final spacewalk.
How many people were on your shuttle, and when you got there on the space station, then what was the total number of people?
So we had 7 crew members on our space shuttle, and there were 3 folks on board the space station, so a total of 10 while we were on orbit.
How many are outside typically at one time?
Always 2.
Always 2?
Always 2. We have one example, I think, where we did 3 for a satellite retrieval a few years back, but we don't do satellite retrievals. They needed kind of a 3-pronged stool to be able to pull the satellite back into the payload bay. We plan to just take 2, and that's really what we take. That's Garrett. Garrett actually flew up with us, and we left him behind and brought back that European astronaut, Leo Earhart's, and Garrett came back in May of 2008 after 90-something days on orbit. The pilot actually flies the undocking. The commander is the guy probably with the most experience, but to make sure that the pilot has some flying experience to do the next rendezvous undocking when he moves over to the left seat, he actually flies the undocking, so the separation, and then flies around the space station while we take a whole bunch of closeout photos, they call them, as we separate to, again, document the configuration. We don't have camera views that can see the entire exterior of the space station, and if something's out of configuration or has been bumped by a spacewalker or has been damaged by micrometeoroid debris, we need to document it. So you can see he's flying and we're all taking pictures. We're getting in this way.
Recently, the two satellites collided. How high are you relative to that? Can you see all this debris they talk about? I mean, does it look crowded?
We're getting ready to close the payload bay doors here and come in for entry. So you'll see us all in our orange suits getting ready to come in for entry. Those satellites that collided were at an altitude that's about twice as high as the space station. I actually don't know the inclination of the orbit, so I don't know where they are relative to us in space. I'll answer a little bit more about that after we come in for the landing. This is the heads-up display that the commander and the pilot are looking at as they come in for landing. We're passing 13,000 feet in that view. This is an infrared image of the orbiter coming in for entry. That's 100 feet, 90 feet. The gear's not down yet.
3225.
So he'll put the gear down and then come down on this final approach. We touched down at roughly 200 knots, so pretty fast as far as vehicles come down at. After we touch down, the crew gets a little bit of a chance to rest, but then we all walked around the orbiter and got a nice, pretty picture of ourselves all smiling together there. One of the things that was exciting for us, I guess, is to have a crew that we all knew each other before we launched. Sometimes that's not the case. Mike Foreman and I had worked at Cape Kennedy quite a bit before going on our mission. Don Gorey I had actually worked with when we did the Columbia Reconstruction Recovery Team. I actually was deployed with him for 3.5 months to East Texas, so he knew me really well. Box I had also worked with in Florida, another Air Force officer. Rick is the first guy I ever did a practice spacewalk in the NBL with. Of course, I knew myself. And this is Takao Doi. He took me on my first trip to Japan and showed me all around long before we were assigned together. So it was really unique for us to have a crew that knew each other so well. And of course, Garrett, who he'd be about this tall if he was in this picture. But Garrett and I went to graduate school together, and so it was a really unique chance to go through a flight with so many close friends.